Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 4th, 2022. Happy 4th of July. Today we are going to be talking about the 2024 presidential election between Governor Ron DeSantis and President Donald Trump. This is amongst the GOP, one of the most important voting groups in this entire country, where we have a primary that now a new poll from YouGov and Yahoo News shows Donald Trump defeating Ron DeSantis in one aspect amongst regular voters by single digits and amongst all adults by just 11 points. Now, these are polls that are done specifically for the Republican Party. They are done amongst Republicans because, of course, you typically don't see independents or Democrats voting in Republican primaries, maybe more recently because of some crossover appeal or open primaries, whatever that might be really talking about. But generally speaking, what we are finding is that the Republican Party seems to be a lot more apprehensive about a Trump re-election bid than they were 2 years ago following Donald Trump's 2020 election defeat. When Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election and continued these claims of election fraud, it riled up the Republican Party, and it kept him in a very positive light amongst Republicans. And that's the thing. Looking at the 2020 election results, we knew that Donald Trump was going to be immediately set up for a potential primary victory in 2024 and a potential re-election bid, simply because of how close it was. Donald Trump didn't exactly lose to some insane electoral mandate for the Democratic Party, as might have been indicated by a 2008 election or a 2012 re-election of President Barack Obama. No. This was a narrow victory for President Biden, and while the Democratic Party did win a trifecta, I can't exactly say it's been by the largest margins or something that is extremely impressive, though it is ultimately impressive because a trifecta hasn't been achieved by the Democratic Party since Obama's first election. But at the end of the day, what we find and what we should expect so far from President Donald Trump is that he does run for re-election. We've seen all of this consideration that he might even announce soon rather than later. We saw some people saying he might announce on the 4th of July, Rudy Giuliani pushing out that narrative that he might be announcing sometime soon. Some of the more internal people as a part of President Trump's potential future bid or that were already a part of his inner circle are saying that he shouldn't announce super early on, even if he may want to. There are these discussions that he might derail the Republican Party for the midterms, or this would turn into a referendum on him should he announce ahead of the midterm elections. Whatever it might be, Donald Trump clearly is not going to be running today on the 4th of July, at least so it seems, unless he makes an announcement within the next 10 hours. But really, we should not be expecting President Trump to be announcing today, but I will say we should probably be expecting him to announce following the midterm elections should the Republican Party win. But the focus of this video wasn't just President Donald Trump, it was also Governor Ron DeSantis, because these new numbers are very impressive for the governor of Florida. Now, Ron DeSantis is up for re-election in 2022, but I can't exactly say that anyone has been doubting his ability to win re-election. FiveThirtyEight has a forecast that shows Ron DeSantis with a 95% chance of victory to Charlie Crist, the Democrat, the former Republican governor. Very interesting. Take a look at that. Charlie Crist, a former Republican, former independent, now House of Representatives member, a Democrat, has a 5% chance of victory and is the presumed Democratic nominee. Looking at the popular vote expectation, Ron DeSantis is expected to win by 12 percentage points across the state. To remind you how Florida is largely going to be this state that doesn't deviate, doesn't typically go one direction or the other when it comes down to wave years, really votes tight every single time, is simply breaking that mold for one person in specific. Governor Ron DeSantis. This 12-point popular vote victory and expectation is unlike anything we've seen for Republicans in the state of Florida. They haven't had double-digit victories in quite some time. So his electability in one of the nation's biggest swing states has definitely brought him into the national forefront for the Republican Party in terms of potential nominees for 2024. Because plainly speaking, he makes a lot of sense electorally, and voters definitely seem to be catching on. As you can see, Ron DeSantis loses by just 9 points or 11 points, whereas other candidates such as Mike Pence in the same exact poll lose by 43 points or 47 points. Voters clearly can't make a decision in a heavy way about whether or not they're voting for Trump or voting for Ron DeSantis. You also see this sort of pour out into other polls from Emerson College or Morning Consult or Politico or McLaughlin and Associates, where they have this question nationwide. Who would you back for 2024 given these 5 to 10 candidates? And you typically find that President Trump does maintain a lead. You see it in Emerson College. You even see it in the poll that I'm talking about today with Ron DeSantis and a Donald Trump matchup. But the interesting thing is that voters aren't backing President Trump in the way that they otherwise might have if there was a very clear consensus that he was going to win this nomination. Looking at the polling data over time, Donald Trump has pretty much fluctuated around the same level as to where he is right now. But I will say that candidates have never really risen to the level that they are currently until more recently. When you take a look at the first polls that were released in January and February of 2021, take a look at the most that really any candidate would get. Typically, you saw maybe Mike Pence at 18%, 11%, 13%, 12%, but he was the only candidate really getting double digits. And then when you take a look at the February, March, April numbers, you rarely ever saw any other candidates getting double digits, and sometimes Mike Pence wouldn't even crack 10%. So when you saw those numbers, it became very clear. President Trump came in with 60% of the vote in the poll. Other candidates were getting 9%, 7%, 3%, 1%, and maybe those voters weren't immediately inclined to vote for the former president, but he was very much the favorite and the popular one amongst them all. But over the past couple of months, Ron DeSantis and partially Mike Pence have been keeping their numbers at a pretty high level, especially Ron DeSantis, now in recent polls at a low of 13, then 15, then 19, then 20, in a matchup with Donald Trump's name thrown into the ring. We know that President Trump is popular amongst the Republican Party. In fact, he has become more popular since the insurrection. But that doesn't mean that voters are going to immediately flock to him. They may like him, and they still may choose him as their nominee. But we are 2 years out, and Donald Trump seems to be blowing a lead that was otherwise so exceptionally large against Ron DeSantis months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. These are things that I look at, and I see them as I see them as opportunities that Donald Trump might have had before that he no longer has. Ron DeSantis has a very good shot at winning the nomination, even if President Trump decides to run. These voters have made it clear in this head-to-head matchup, according to YouGov and Yahoo News, that Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump would be within a competitive primary. I can't say the same about the remaining other candidates that seem to be thrown onto this list. Realistically speaking, if these are the numbers in the matchup, and then amongst the same group, you find that Donald Trump is defeating Pence by 43 and 47, the problem isn't that, Ron DeSantis is on the ballot, or maybe Mike Pence is on the ballot, but more so that Donald Trump isn't winning over groups of voters that he otherwise might have previously. But it is more exemplified when voters are given an opportunity, such as Ron DeSantis. Looking at the polls that Donald Trump has seen, as a former incumbent who has made clearly every intention that he's going to run, only at 55%, what does that say? That he is only at 55%. I get it. In 2016, he did not need to win the primary vote in the Republican primary in order to win by an overwhelming amount. He only got 44% of the primary vote by the end of it. The majority of voters did not vote for Donald Trump in the Republican primary, yet now he is practically the only face you think about when you talk about the Republican Party. But 44% was impressive for him back then. It is certainly not impressive to only be 11 points higher after you have already served a first term. It's not just that. Other polls show him even at a lower point, 51%. Some of them show him at 59%, but then you're back down in other polls. Overall, what we are finding is that Donald Trump might be winning and might still maintain this lead of what seems to be impressive of 36 points, but you can't ignore the fact that 9% of these voters want Pence, 3% want Nikki Haley, 1% want Mike Pompeo, and a whopping 20% want Governor Ron DeSantis. Because when you add them all up, sure, they might lose to Donald Trump, but it is clear that these voters that are opting to choose somebody else seem to be more inclined to vote for Ron DeSantis than they are to move back towards President Trump. Voters are moving towards other candidates for a reason, because they don't want a repeat of the 2020 presidential election. I also see this election rigging idea and lie that President Trump has been perpetuating, and I don't think that's a partisan thing to say at all. This is a lie. The election was not rigged. Joe Biden fairly won the election. I don't care what documentary you might want to cite to me or what election rule Republicans changed before the election. At the end of the day, Republicans, even if they did change rules in states, are to blame for their own loss. This was an election defeat, and I'm tired of relitigating that, but the point being that voters still recognize this. Donald Trump has built up this narrative that the election was rigged because I honestly think he sees that as his in to the 2024 nomination, and it is a perfect way in. When Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 presidential election, there were murmurs of a 2020 presidential run, but everyone knew it was unrealistic, and Democrats were only backing their former nominee by 18 to 19 points. There were other candidates that could have ran that, sure, Hillary Clinton might have been getting higher percentage of the vote, but 18 to 19% as a former Democratic contender, as the former nominee getting a poll just months later following your loss, people realize that there's something about you that doesn't necessarily make you electable. But when your voting group believes that the election was stolen and that you won in what you decree as a landslide, they're going to want to renominate you. But again, not everyone believes the election was rigged. Only about 1 in 3 Americans do, and Donald Trump won roughly 1 in 2 Americans in the 2020 and 2016 presidential elections. So you're talking about a significant drop-off, enough so that I think there are voters out there that while they may like President Trump, realize he is not the most electable choice. And I do 100% stand by that characterization of him, because he, truly speaking, is not the most electable choice. I also brought up Ron DeSantis' numbers to say that some people view him as electable, but also to point out that I very much view him as electable. Even with Biden being down 18 points nationwide, Donald Trump only beats him by 2 points in election polls. Why is there a 16-point drop-off between President Trump's margin of victory and Joe Biden's disapproval? That simply doesn't make sense. But why it's happening? Well, it might be explained by the fact that those who disapprove of Biden don't necessarily mean they're voting for Republicans, but also the fact that Donald Trump is a name that voters know and have rejected before. Joe Biden has the benefit of being the incumbent, and also the benefit of might not being the 2024 Democratic nominee, which means that popularity rating, while it might matter to some extent, won't matter nearly as much in that general election ballot if he's replaced by Kamala Harris, replaced by whoever it might be on the Democratic side. Those are possibilities. And those are things that the Democratic Party won't have to worry about as much. But looking at President Trump's electoral performance against Biden, I'm not exactly impressed. The fact that the former president is only about 45% in general election data and only about 55% amongst his own party, that shows that there is some significant push against him. And in these head-to-head polls, you find Donald Trump and Mike Pence, you see a blowout for the former president. But against Ron DeSantis, it gets so exceptionally close. You mention Pence's name, Trump's support jumps up 20 points relative to how they responded amongst registered voters for Ron DeSantis. Mike Pence versus DeSantis percentage, what you find is that 20 points nearly translates into immediate support for Ron DeSantis. A 9-point victory is not impressive. Donald Trump has said multiple times, I would beat Ron DeSantis in a primary. Ron DeSantis wouldn't be in the governor spot without me. That Ron DeSantis would be a good vice president. President Trump clearly is afraid of Ron DeSantis and is fronting like he isn't. And while I do think Donald Trump very well can win the primary, as many people expect, I don't think that Donald Trump is going to do as well as he could if Ron DeSantis runs against him. And I think it will be a very close primary process. Remind yourself, we are 2 years away from the nomination spot. This is Donald Trump's nomination to lose. Not to win, but to lose. For someone who started out as the very clear and consistent frontrunner, that means that everything thus far has been done in an effort or will aid in the decrease in support that Donald Trump receives. Because it isn't going to go up. It isn't going to get to a point where now all of a sudden 80% of Republican Party voters want to back President Trump. At a high point, 70%. And that's pushing it to a new extreme. Voters and candidates are chipping away at Trump's lead because they know that Donald Trump might not necessarily be the most electable or strongest Republican candidate. And I do agree with that wholeheartedly because I do not think that he is. Trump being at 49% right now means that it's probably going to go down. It could go up. It could go back up to 70%. But even then, 30% of the party doesn't want to vote for you again. What does that say as an incumbent who, in terms of approval, is maintaining heavy 80 to 90 to 95% in terms of approval? What does that say about you and what voters think about you amongst your own party? Just food for thought. Ron DeSantis, I think, will be president of the United States one day, and his election performance in Florida isn't the only thing telling me that. Ron DeSantis is essentially President Donald Trump, except he goes about things in a much more efficient and eloquent manner. He might be as extreme, maybe more extreme in some people's eyes. But at the end of the day, Ron DeSantis is clearly an electable candidate, whether on the presidential level, enough so that he could potentially even take on a former incumbent president of the United States and win the general election against another incumbent president of the United States. It's just a lot of this is explaining and showing us that Ron DeSantis could win a nomination. Donald Trump's biggest threat is Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis is winning in a state that Democrats haven't been able to win by maybe more than 8 to 9 points in decades. What we are seeing here is that Ron DeSantis has proven himself in Florida, and I honestly think he can prove himself on the national level. Do I think this is going to be a 400 plus electoral vote blowout? Do I think this is going to be a 350 plus electoral vote blowout? No, I don't. As any presidential election in the modern stance of American politics, it's going to be close. But I can't say that I disagree with this idea that Ron DeSantis is more electable than Donald Trump because, speaking honestly, he 100% is more electable than the former president, and which is why he probably poses a significant threat to Donald Trump's potential nomination. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen of this video, you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.